Hi, I'm Arlene McIntyre, Creative Director at Ventura Design, and you're listening to Shut the Front Door, a light-hearted podcast that will bring you through the front door and into the homes of influential and interesting people. Home for me is one of the most important things in my life. My career has fortunately given me the opportunity to work closely with people and to help them create a home they will cherish forever. Today on Shut the Front Door, we have the honour of being joined by the formidable Vicky Phelan. Women's health advocate and mother to Amelia and Darragh, Vicky found herself thrust into the public spotlight as the result of a CervicalCheck crisis in 2018. Her voice since this date has helped save and educate many across Ireland, given strength to those who felt they had no fight left in them, and broken the boundaries of patient advocacy in Ireland. Author of the powerful autobiography, Overcoming, Vicky describes herself as being definitely a Scorpio. It's with great pleasure that I now introduce Vicky Phelan to Shut the Front Door. Thank you for joining us, Vicky.
Thanks very much, Arlene.
I'm a Capricorn, so what does that mean? You're definitely a Scorpio, and I think I'm definitely a Capricorn.
Well, I suppose Scorpios have a sting in their tail. You don't cross somebody who's a Scorpio, and I suppose I definitely would kind of think that I'd be along those lines. I don't forgive very easily, but I'm also very loyal. One thing about Scorpions is that they're loyal to a fault with their friends. And I would definitely be like that. I don't make friends very easily, but when I do, I'm a friend for life, I suppose. So I'm definitely a true Scorpion.
A true Scorpion. And I have a few Scorpion friends, actually. Yeah, they are very loyal and they're women of their words, actually.
Yeah, I think that's it. I mean, if I say I'm going to do something, I do it,
That's all good. The whole podcast today, Vicky, is just to chat to you about your home and your childhood memories of your home and where you are now with your home. So maybe we can start with your childhood memories of your home. Tell me about where you grew up and what memories you have.
So I'm the oldest of 5 kids, and my parents got married very young. They were only 19 and 18 when they got married, so they were very young, and they wouldn't have had an awful lot of money. So we lived actually for the first 5 years of my life, we lived in a very damp cottage down the road from where my father grew up, near the river. And one of the stories in my book actually is about when I was about 3, myself and the dog, we had a dog called Bruce, took a little wander down to the river. So we were about maybe half a mile from the river. And I would have gone down there every day with my dad because my dad and all of his family were fishermen. So they were always down at the river. So, of course, I toddled off on my own one day down to the river with the dog and couldn't be found anywhere. So, I kind of wandered off at a very early age. But I loved the freedom, I think, of, living in the country and by water, I suppose. That was kind of when I realised, I suppose, that I loved water. I've always been drawn to it. But when I was 5, then we moved because I think at that stage there were 3 of us, and the house wasn't big. It was only a small cottage with 2 bedrooms. So Mum and Dad got a council house in Mooncoin, which is the village where she was from, about 3 miles away from where we had been living. So we moved into the council house when I was 5, and I had to move schools. So I moved into the school in the village at that stage, which was a girls' school, primary school with the nuns in a convent. And so that's where Mum and Dad are still living now, 45 years later. But it was just a regular kind of 3-bedroom council house. But by the time there were 5 of us, then it was quite tight. And my father's a carpenter. So because, before my sister came along, she's the youngest. I have 3 brothers. And then my sister is the youngest. There's 11 years between me and her. My dad kind of adapted the room for the boys because they only had 3 bedrooms. So I had my own bedroom. I had this small, tiny box room. You know yourself, box rooms are the smallest things. But he was so good with his hands, my dad, that he kind of built a bed for me over the box rooms, they have a little box over the stairs.
Yes.
That kind of has the slope for the stairs coming up. That's kind of useless. So my dad built my bed on top of that and put storage underneath it. And then, so he just kind of used the space, I suppose, to give me a little bit more. So, it was very, very innovative and kind of very good like that. And then the 3 boys were sharing, a small enough double room. And again, he built, 2 bunk beds on the top and 1 on the bottom and kind of storage kind of underneath the single bunk on the top for them to make it a bit more interesting for them, I suppose, to have a bit of storage for 3 boys. But yeah, it was a busy house now, I can tell you that much, growing up.
And that is always nice to have loads of brothers and sisters. I'm sure that's, you have only but good memories from all of that.
Yeah, well, I do and I don't. I suppose I do in that it was one thing, the house was always so busy, and I suppose because I was the oldest and my mother was working, but from the age of 10 or 11, I would have had to come home from school. Mum would have had everything, kind of all the spuds peeled and vegetables ready to go on, but I'd have to put the dinner
Mm.
on. So there was a lot of responsibility kind of from a young age. And I remember thinking kind of when, by the time I was old enough, there is no way I'm having 5 kids. I kind of,
Yeah.
yeah, I decided at a very young age, like I'm having two. If I have children, two, that's it. Definitely not this
Hmm.
five madness. So it was great. And now I suppose as I'm older, as you grow up and, have your
Mm.
own kids, it is lovely to have siblings, because I see that I only have 2 kids myself. And at the moment, they're at an age where they don't really get on with each other. She's 14, he's 9.
Mm.
But I think as you get older, you appreciate your siblings a lot more and you kind of develop a better relationship.
That's
And
true.
that's definitely happened with me, I suppose, and my siblings, since we've all had children. We've kind of, become much more uh, tolerant of each other, I suppose, and just have developed better friendships. But I suppose when I was growing up, before my sister came along, because I had 3 brothers, I was a real tomboy. So I was playing with all the boys, you know what I mean? It was always, out playing soccer, or we'd go off. Um, I remember, we'd go off in the morning if the weather was good and we were on our holidays or on the weekends, and we'd go off over the fields and we'd bring off, tools belonged to my dad, and he'd kill us. We'd have hammers and stuff gone, and we'd be building our own treehouse over the fields. And my mother wouldn't see us for literally about 5 or 6 hours until we came home when we were hungry. So it was a lovely childhood, from that point of view. That there was a great freedom in it.
Yeah. And do your family live all nearby? Are you all living in Limerick together at the moment, in the area of Limerick?
No, I'm the only one that lives away from home. So I'm in Limerick, and all my family are down in County Kilkenny and Waterford. They're
I
split
see.
between, yeah, yeah. So it's about 2 hours.
I see. And you see them still like at Christmas time, or would you see them regularly, or?
Yeah, yeah. So we always go down at Christmas after, we have our Christmas here and the kids open their presents. So we'd stay
Mm.
for maybe 2 or 3 days here at home. And then we'd always go down home to Kilkenny to visit the families.
And it must be really difficult for you, as it is for so many, with all the restrictions that we have on the road at the moment. And it's a difficult time, especially with Mother's Day having been recently.
Oh, it's been so difficult, Arlene. That's to be honest, that's the hardest part that
Mm.
I have found about this lockdown is not seeing my parents,
Mm.
because I haven't seen my mother since the 6th of February. I can actually pinpoint it to a date. She actually came
Really?
up here to Limerick. Yeah, she came up, and it was just kind of a spontaneous kind of arrangement. I saw this deal for a spa treatment, and I rang Mam on a Sunday, and I said, "Sure, come up tomorrow on the bus." I said, and we'll go and do spa treatments and have lunch. And she did. And thank God she did, because I hadn't seen
Yeah.
her since, it was probably around the end of January when we came back from New Zealand. We had gone to New Zealand for Christmas. And because we'd been in New Zealand for Christmas, we hadn't seen our parents and our families much. And when we came back, like the kids had already missed maybe a week of school. So we hadn't spent that much time down in Kilkenny, when we came back from New Zealand. So I haven't seen a huge amount of my parents really since
Yes.
before Christmas. And it's been hard. It's been really hard.
I know. I can't imagine. And how are you doing with the homeschooling, Vicky?
Not too bad. I mean, my daughter is very like me. She's in second year now in secondary school, and she's a bit of a nerd, I suppose. Like me, loves school. So she's getting on with it. I don't really check her in on her too much, because
Hmm.
she's quite kind of conscientious. My son is another story. He's 9, and a typical boy. There's some days he'll do it no problem, and then there's other days where he's literally throwing pencils across the floor. So it
Oh,
depends
so.
on what version I get on the day. That where he. And in
Mm.
fairness, I understand it. It's very frustrating, because he loved, not that he loved school, he misses all his friends, and he loved his teacher. It was the first time he'd had a male teacher since he started school, and he absolutely adores him. So he really misses having that as well, So it's been hard. It's been hard for him. And he doesn't have great, like typical boy, doesn't have great concentration span. So I kind of have to do it in spurts. But look, we're getting there.
Yeah, we're getting there. And how do you find your coping as well? Like, how are you connecting with your network and your friends? Is it mainly by phone? Are you using Zoom and FaceTime?
It's a bit of both. It depends on what friends I'm talking to. Some of my friends
Yeah.
are less techie than others. I like my best friend. One of my best friends. There's three of us. Kind of we've been best friends for like since we were 5. and we tried to set up a video kind of calling arrangement where we'd have a drink together at home. I'm sure lots of people are doing it. But like trying to get
Yeah.
her set up to get working was hilarious. So we eventually agreed that we'd use WhatsApp because there was only 3 of us. Because I think once you go over 4 or 5 people, you have to use House Party or Zoom or some of those apps. And that was definitely beyond her. We knew that much. So we said we'd try WhatsApp. And actually her 9-year-old daughter got it working for her. Which I thought was hilarious, Yeah, isn't it? Just goes to show our kids are far more clued in than we are. Oh, yeah.
Definitely. If I'm stuck with my phone, I just hand it to some younger person. I just can't deal with it. I'm like, oh my God, what's happened to my phone?
I know.
And they have it sorted out in a second. Yeah.
Yeah, because my daughter, I was doing a Skype interview? I was doing some interview for some show a couple of weeks back, and they asked me, they needed me to use FaceTime. That was it. And I don't use Apple products. I just, I use Android products. I have a Samsung phone, and I use the laptops. But my daughter has an Apple phone, and she has an iPad. So I asked her, could I borrow her iPad? Sure, I couldn't use it, so she had to set it up for me. She was laughing, thinking this was hilarious. So yeah, our children are definitely more clued in.
They definitely are. There are little teachers, actually, in some ways.
Yeah.
And can you remember what your teenage room looked like? I know it sounded like it was a box room, and you were in a very busy household. But how did you find it was like for you to create your own space?
I think it's very important as teenagers, isn't it? I mean, even I remember that, you have to kind of make your own stamp on your room, from a young age, don't you, to make it yours. And I remember at the time, and I'm going to be really, mortified saying this, but my favourite band at 13, 14 was Bros. I don't know if you remember Bros.
I do, of course I do.
Yeah. So I remember showing my daughter a video of them singing, and she was cringing. She said, "Oh my God, Ma'am, I can't believe you like that band." And I said, "I know, but I was only 13. Yeah, you can't choose who you like." And I loved Bros. And I mean, I was obsessed with Bros. I really was.
Really?
Oh my God, I'm so obsessed with them that my father. I mean, it was great that I was able to use the skills of my parents, because my mother's a really good. She knits, but she also sews. She would have made wedding dresses and.
Wow.
Curtains, yeah, she's really good. Upholstering, she can put her hand to anything, really. So I remember there was a logo for Bros. I don't know if you remember. There was, one of them stood in the middle with the 2 guys standing on either side of them, and it was like a stick insect kind of a logo. But my father actually got the logo. I printed it off for him, and he drew it out on a template, and he made a table for me, a desk with the Bros logo on it. He stained the logo a different kind of a darker timber, and then he put the rest of the table like a lighter shade of it was oak or something. So I had a Bros table, and then my mother knit me a jumper with the Bros logo on the back. Like, that's how dedicated I was.
You were a true fan, Vicky.
I was a true fan, and I had the Grolsch bottle tops and the torn jeans and the whole lot. And then obviously my whole room was papered with posters of Bros from Just 17 and Smash Hits magazines. Yeah. So I had posters.
Hits.
Yeah, do you remember that?
I do. Yeah. I do. I remember that. And it was also Top of the Pops and Smash Hits. They were like they were like the things to read and watch when I first moved here from America. I was like, oh my God, I gotta get on this train. Everybody else was on that with those books and magazines, and it was hilarious. I think other bands I remember were Bananarama was really huge at the time.
Yeah, they were quite big. Aha, do you remember Aha?
I do. Yeah, exactly. Oh, that's so funny.
And I remember, I would try to explain this to my daughter, and it was even difficult to try and explain the concept of cassette tapes. Do you remember? I mean, I said to her, unless, my father wouldn't have had enough money for me to go out buying, tapes of bands. So you used to have to record them when you heard them on the radio. So you'd have the cassette in the tape recorder ready to go. And the minute you'd hear the song, you'd start the record button. So you'd have all these mixtapes, So, when you think back.
I know. It's so great. I still have a box of tapes somewhere. I came across them. I don't know what I'm going to do with them, but I'd love to kind of just transfer everything that I have on them into something.
I know, it would be lovely to keep them. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. Yeah. I'm going to find a way. And that's the sort of thing I've been doing actually in the last week of the lockdown. I've been pottering and digging and opening up the presses and just doing all the things that I've had on the to-do list.
Yeah.
I've been doing. How about you? How have you been finding it?
Yeah, me too. I tell you what I've been trying to do that I've been putting off forever, I think like everybody. And it's not that it's something you hate doing, but it's just, it's going to take you a while to sit down and sort through them. It's to sort through photos. And for me, I suppose it's very important because, um, you know, I have loads of photos, but they're all either on my phone or they're on the camera and I have to upload them onto the laptop. So I'm starting to sort through them to put them into folders, ones that I want to print off and get framed, ones that I just want to maybe make an album out of, So it's something that it's nice to go through it, but you never have the time to do these things. And for me, I suppose I want to get this project done, and as soon as the shops are open, I'm literally going to go in and get the ones printed off that I want framed, because I don't know, I suppose in my situation how long I've got left, and it would be terrible if I didn't get to a point where I could print these off and hang them up and look at them, because
Yeah,
there's something about actually having them framed and on your wall rather than just going through them on your phone or your camera.
I totally agree.
So that's one thing I'm doing, and it's a nice thing to do.
So tell me a little bit, Vicky, about your morning ritual. How do you start your day?
During lockdown or just in general?
General.
General. So if it's a weekday morning that the kids are in school, my son starts school quite early. They start at 8:30, so it's an early start. We usually get up around 7, and get his breakfast, get his lunch, and he gets himself dressed and then get him out the door. So I drop him to school and then come back, and usually I'm back home by 8:30, which is a nice kind of time to start your day. So I usually sit down then and have my own breakfast properly, have a nice cup of coffee at that stage, and I check Twitter. So I would start kind of checking Twitter, check the news, see what's going on, if there's anything I need to kind of, make a comment about, or if there's anything that
Yeah.
I think I need to talk to, say, Stephen Teep, since I started this whole CervicalCheck campaigning. Stephen Teep has been one of my kind of allies, I suppose. He lost his wife as a result of cervical cancer. So if there's anything in the news that I think that we need to kind of weigh in on, I'd always ring him first and we'll have a chat.
Yes.
And, so that's kind of usually what I start my day in, is checking the news really to see what's going on, and kind of responding to tweets and messages. And then if I have things that I have to do, some days I have to go to Dublin, whether it's for treatment or for interviews or meetings. And if I'm staying at home, I kind of really don't bother getting dressed until I have to, because, more often than not, if I'm going out, I have to get dressed, put on the makeup, do all of that. So if I'm at home, I don't bother. I just kind of slob around the house, really, to be honest, because I can, and it's nice to be able to do it, I think.
And how do you feel the health system, our health system at the moment, is handling the situation? It's just so difficult for them. Um, but in particular with people that are, struggling with cancer at the moment, how do you think it's all being handled?
I think from the point of view of dealing with patients like me who still have to have treatment in the middle of
Hmm.
a pandemic, I think they're doing very well. I was actually up in Dublin yesterday for treatment. So I only have to go for treatment every 6 weeks, which is great now.
Yeah.
I've been moved over to kind of a longer period, which happened literally just before we went to New Zealand. So it actually came at a perfect time with the pandemic, because normally I'd be up every 3 weeks. So, the fact that I don't have to go up again now for another 6 weeks is great. And, it's a relief to me that I don't have to kind of go into a hospital, because unfortunately,
Mm.
hospitals are hotbeds of the virus, because there are so many people, healthcare workers going in and out. And, we know that 25% of them, at the moment in Ireland have the virus. So it is a worry for patients going into hospitals. But I have to say, after going up there yesterday, I cannot fault the preparations that they've put in place
Hmm.
to kind of put patients at ease. So, they were literally only checking in one patient at a time. So, you were never in the same room as another patient at any time when I was up
It's
there.
good.
So, yeah, it's really good. And
Hmm.
then everybody was in, some were in full PPE gear, some just had the masks on and gloves, obviously. But, while the nurses were talking to me, say at check-in, they were keeping their distance, so they weren't coming over to me. When I went up onto the ward where I have my treatment, and, met the usual nurses that I deal with when I'm up for treatment, I was in an individual bay, so all the patients in St. Vincent's Hospital, where I go for treatment, have moved into the private hospital, because in the private hospital, they have individual bays for each patient, so you're not sitting beside somebody. Whereas in the public hospital, where I normally go for treatment, it's kind of like a big long line of, I don't know, there's 10 or 12 beds, and they're quite close, not that close together, but closer than 2 meters. So that's why they've moved to the private hospital, so that there's that distance between people, which is great. So, I definitely felt very reassured yesterday that my health and my well-being was looked after, and that of the healthcare workers as well, obviously, because I was very conscious of that as well, that these people are very prone to picking this virus up. So I was trying to make sure that I was doing my bit as well to protect them.
Yeah. And Vicky, I just have to say, and I've followed you and I have been following you for some time, I just think you're so incredibly strong. Have you always been this strong? Where do you think the strength comes from?
Yeah, I suppose I have really. I've always been very how would you put it? I suppose I'm very like my mother, that kind of, I'm trying to think of the word, is stoic, that kind of person that kind of,
Hmm.
and my sister often says it, when something happens, me and Mam will kind of, you know, not react straight away. We're kind of absorbing it, whereas my sister's the real drama queen. She'll be bawling, and we're like worlds
I
apart,
know.
totally different in the way we deal with things. Whereas I'm kind of sitting there, and but I'm mulling. It's not that I don't react. I'm doing it in my head before I react with my face or with my emotions, and that's kind of always the way I've dealt with stuff, I suppose. And look, a lot of it goes back to the fact that, from a fairly young age, shit started happening to me. I was 18 when I had my car crash in France. And that was really, I suppose, a pivotal moment in my life that really made me um, see that life is not easy, that life is quite difficult. And, I had to grow up very fast, really, at that stage when that happened. And that was, very hard. And I suffered terribly, for about 2 years after that accident.
Can you just tell me a little bit about that? So in case any of our listeners wasn't aware of that, just
Yeah.
maybe share some more of that with us.
So I was on my work placement. I was in college at the university in Limerick, and as part of the program that I was studying on, I was doing a 2 language degree program. We had to live in France and Spain in order to improve our language. So I was on a work placement in France, and I was actually nearly finished. I only had about 3 weeks left to go, I think, at this stage, and we were out for a night out celebrating one of the other French students, actually, who was just finishing up on her placement. And we went to a nightclub, and on the way home, about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, on these really small back roads in the middle of nowhere in France, we crashed into another car. So the car that crashed into us, there was 5 of us in our car: me, my boyfriend at the time, Christophe, who was driving, and then there was 3 in the back: Katie, another Christophe, another French guy, and Lisa, an Irish student who was also a student in UL at the time. And the guy who crashed into us fell asleep at the wheel, and they did reports afterwards, obviously, on his an autopsy, and he wasn't drinking. He just fell asleep. He was on medication that made him tired, so he shouldn't have been driving, obviously. But look, he paid the ultimate price. He died as well. So in our car, then Christophe, who was driving, died immediately. He his neck snapped, literally, because there was no headrests in the car. And so all of these things, you see the importance in cars of wearing seatbelts, headrests. You can see why they're so important, because we had no headrest, so he died immediately because his head snapped. I was wearing a seatbelt, and even though it broke practically every bone in my body, it saved my life. So you can see, so I'd be a very strong advocate kind of for, I suppose, car safety. But I broke 70% of the bones in my body. I spent nearly 4 months in hospital. Almost didn't make it. My poor parents got a phone call in the middle of the night to say that I was in surgery, and they didn't know whether I'd make it or not, and they had to try and make their way over to France. And my parents at the time had never left the country, ever. They'd never been outside of Ireland, and they had to travel to France. They had no passports. They had to get emergency passports in the middle of the night, and pick them up. I think 2 guards dropped them out to the airport when they arrived, and not knowing whether I was going to be alive or dead when they got here. But I survived, obviously. But it was a long recovery. I was on crutches for about 12 months, and but apart from the physical recovery, it was the mental, and emotional recovery that was much more difficult than anything else, I suppose, because I was so young, and it really kind of, at 18, 19, like anybody in college, what do you what are your worries? Having enough money for going
I know.
for a few
Yeah.
drinks and eating spaghetti bolognese and studying for your exams, and suddenly,
Yeah.
my whole world was turned upside down, and two people I really, loved, died, and I'd no opportunity to go to a funeral because I was in hospital. So it was very hard to get my head around it. So it was a long recovery, but it definitely, I think, shaped the person I've become, because I learned from an early age that bad things can happen to good people, and often there's
Yeah.
no explanation, and you have to learn to cope with that in whatever way you can.
Absolutely. So, in a sense, that experience gave you the tools,
Yeah,
in a
absolutely.
sense, to really deal with all the incredibly hard life lessons that you've had to date.
Yes, it
Would
did.
that be fair to say?
It would, yeah, it would. I suppose one of the things, I mean, I was so young back then, that was back in the early 90s. I mean, I had no counselling at the time, or no, psychological support, because it wasn't really it's not that it wasn't the done thing. Nobody suggested it. And I certainly didn't know that I needed it, because I was, 19. And, often we've had this conversation, myself and my mother. My mother feels terribly guilty that she didn't kind of, think of, suggesting it, or ask, organising something. And I said, sure, ma'am, nobody did it back then. She often beats herself up about it, because it kind of came back to bite me about 10 years later, really, when I hadn't had any kind of counselling for it, when I was pregnant with my daughter, and my pregnancy kind of started becoming very complicated. And that, posed further problems, and I really couldn't deal with it. And I remember going for counselling at that point, after I had Amelia, when I was suffering from postnatal depression. And I remember the counsellor saying to me, kept asking about my accident, and kept going back to it. And I remember I kind of lost the cool with her one day, and I said, "Why are you asking me about this accident? It has nothing to do with what's happening now." And she said, "Oh, it has everything to do with what's happening now, because you never dealt with it." And it's funny, it was the first time I kind of went, "Oh, okay." So a lot of
Yeah.
this stuff, you bury it, and if you do bury it,
Hmm.
it's going to come back at some stage. So, I had to kind of try and resurface it, and deal with it at that stage. Um, so yeah, I suppose these things happen, and it's how you deal with them. And that's one thing that I've learned, I suppose, with everything that's happened. It's how you deal with these things at the time that kind of dictates how you're going to react, and how you're going to be. If you bury it, it's just going to be worse, because it will come back to bite you, and it usually is far worse
Yeah.
if you don't deal with
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. And of course, you just have to deal with it in your own time. You can't force somebody to, deal with it. If you sound like you like to take things as they come and digest things as they come, and in your own way and in your own time, you'll get around to dealing with everything.
Yeah, I'm a very, I drive my parents and my sister crazy, because I'm a very, even though, I'm going to laugh when I say this now, because here I am talking about it publicly, but I am actually a very private person. When something happens to me, I have to process it myself first before I talk to somebody about it. And I've always been like that. I mean, I remember the time when my cancer came back, actually, the second time, and I knew it wasn't good, and I knew, I didn't have much time, and I kept that to myself for 2 months, until after Christmas, because I didn't want to ruin anybody's Christmas, but also because I needed the time. I needed that time to get my head around it myself,
Yeah.
before I started telling people, because I find, I suppose, when you tell somebody something bad, immediately you can see their face and their reaction, and most people will start crying, especially with the type of news
Yes.
I'm giving them, and that doesn't help me, so I need to be ready for that when it comes. So
Hmm.
I kind of have to process it myself before I deal with other people's emotions.
Then you're kind of putting out their fires. So you just first have to get
Yeah,
in control of it yourself. Yeah, exactly. Get on top of the narrative, if you like, of what's happening, and then you're ready to share it with someone else. Yeah.
exactly.
My goodness, I do. I admire you so much, Vicky, and I like that. I just think you're so incredibly strong and to be admired. You're absolutely incredible. Which brings me to your book, Overcoming. How did you find writing that book?
I actually found the book very cathartic for me, and that's not why I wrote it. I mean, I wrote it initially. My main focus in writing that book was for my two kids, because at the time when we started writing the book, I didn't know whether the drug would work, and I didn't know whether I'd still be here, to be honest, by the time the book came out. So I really wrote the book for my two kids, because I wanted them to know their mother, um, outside of me being mammy. Do you know what I mean? I wanted them to know that I was a teenager once, and that, stories about my childhood and stories about when I was growing up, that I might never get to tell them myself. So I suppose that was my main motivation in writing the book, was to write it for my kids, and also so that they'd understand why, at that stage, I was up and down to Dublin quite a lot, attending meetings, going to, public account committee meetings with government officials. I was gone quite a lot. I could have been up in Dublin 1 or 2 days a week. And my son was always the one who would kind of call it, and he'd say, "Ma'am, why are you always gone? Why can't you just stay at home?" So
Yeah.
that was one of the things I kind of wanted him to understand when he was old enough, why I was doing all of this, that it was important. And the reason I was gone, was to help other people and to try and make our health system better, and, you can't explain that to a 9-year-old. So I thought, well, at least if I have a book, when he's old enough, he can read it and kind of go, oh, that's why Mom did all of this stuff, So that was my main motivation. But actually, what I wasn't kind of reckoning on was how good it would be for me to do it, was actually the process of it. So I found it very hard, actually, at times, kind of rereading stuff. So I remember when Naomi would send me draft chapters, I'd read them and send them back to her with kind of comments, or say, no, it didn't happen like that, or So I remember reading the chapter about my accident, and I thought, oh shit, this will be fine, because I've dealt with it. It was 25 years ago. I've parked that part of my life, and I'll be fine. But I actually remember getting halfway through the chapter, kind of, and I was literally back there. It was so vivid. I was back there in my head, and I had to stop reading because I got so upset. So it took me a while with some chapters to read them, to kind of read them, digest them, and kind of go back to her and say, yeah, that's, what happened, or, maybe change this. But I found it very hard to read some of them because it was so close to the bone, and I was having to relive the experience in my own head again. But actually, the more I had to do that, and the more I had to go back over those chapters, the better it was for me. Because, for example, Amelia's accident, Amelia got very badly burned in an accident at home when she was 7. And of all the things that have happened to me, that is the worst thing that has ever. And I mean, even now, I can feel myself kind of tearing up. But I can talk about it now. I couldn't talk about her accident for years without getting really upset. So writing the book made it much easier for me to be able to deal with her accident and to be able to talk about it. And that's good. That's good for me because, I'm over it now, and she's over it, and she's doing really well. But it's something that's very difficult to go back to, painful experiences in your life. But I definitely found writing about it definitely helped me to kind of move past it.
I can't imagine. And the fact that, you seem to be very good at protecting yourself. And then when this happened to Amelia, that might have been your feeling of that you wanted to protect her. And that's probably where that emotion transferred perhaps over
Yeah,
to that situation.
I'm a control freak, Arlene, total control freak. So, whatever about, stuff happening to me, you can control what's happening to you and how you react to it. But when it happens to, particularly your child, my God, I
Yeah.
couldn't protect her from it. I couldn't stop the pain. I
Hmm.
couldn't
I know.
take it away from her. And that nearly killed me. It nearly broke me, to be honest, at the time when she was
Oh,
in hospital.
God.
It was horrendous, just watching her in pain and not being able to do anything. There's nothing worse.
And how is she now?
She's great. She's great. She had surgery at the time. She had skin graft surgery, and we kept having to go back for checkups, every year. But she doesn't even have to go back for checkups now. All her skin grafts have taken, and as her body has grown, her body has adjusted, and yes, she has quite significant scarring on her torso, and she might have to have, more kind of reconstructive surgery when she's older. But she's great, and I could never envisage at the time, when I remember looking at her body thinking, oh my God, how is she going to, ever get in a swimsuit? How is she ever going to wear a strapless dress? And as a mother, you're looking at all these things going, you just want your child to be normal, and you just want your child to be happy and not to have attention drawn to them for the wrong reasons. So, but at the same time, I had to let her go back out into the world. I remember I had a conversation with her. We brought her for therapy, obviously, to see a play therapist. And it was the play therapist. And, I'm glad she did call me out on it. That was kind of saying to me, I know you think you're doing the right thing, Vicky, by protecting her. But she said you can't, she has to learn to get used to people looking at her scars and to be able to answer the questions that people are asking her. Because usually it was kids would just say, oh, why is your skin all red? Or, why do you look like that? In a swimsuit. And I was trying to kind of get her to wear swimming togs that would cover her, like the little
Yeah.
what you call those little rash vests. That's it.
Yes.
I thought I was doing the right
Like
thing.
little tube tops,
Yeah,
nearly.
exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas Amelia wanted to wear togs, like any other normal kid. And the therapist said that to me. She said, that says more about you than your daughter. She said, your daughter
Mm,
wants to be the same as everybody else. Let her. And she said, you stand back and let her answer the questions if somebody asks her about why her skin is red or, why she looks like that. And it used to kill me. I'd be breaking up inside. But I had to do it for her. And I'm glad I did because, she had to learn to deal with it herself.
and is she like you in ways, do you think?
Oh my
I know
God.
you said that she's an academic like yourself, but do you feel that in terms of her inner strength, do you think she's a tough little cookie like you?
100%. She is literally, of all the people I admire, Amelia is my hero. She's 14 years of age, and she has gone through far more in her 14 years than I've done in 45. Do you know? And she's dealt with it in such, like, she gets up every morning. There's always a smile on her face. She bounces back from all of these things, and she's a great kid. And she's got absolutely amazing strength. And she just wants to be the same as everybody else, and that's all anybody wants, isn't it? And
That's
yeah,
so true.
she's amazing. She's an amazing child.
That's great. And tell me a little bit about your home now. Where is your favorite place in your home?
My favorite place in the house is probably the kitchen, I suppose. And God, that's going to sound typical woman, isn't it? But I love my kitchen, not because I love cooking by any means. It's actually just it's a bright room. It's
Mhm.
back of the house, so it's south facing, so all the sun comes in the kitchen in the morning, and it's a really bright room. So it's kind of like it's not painted white, but kind of an off white. So like when the
Mhm.
sun comes in, it literally would dazzle you. And then we've got blue, high glass kind of blue kitchen units, and a kind of it's called Dicton, but it's kind of like a marble worktop that we've kind of used as a table as well. So it's kind of a white with a kind of a goldy, marbly thread going through it, and it's just lovely and bright. And we've got kind of like an burnt orange kind of fabric covered chairs. So it's really, nice bright colors and really kind of welcoming and kind of sunny. It's really that kind of a room that you kind of really want to kind of wake up in and do stuff in. So yeah, really, I love sitting there with a cup of coffee and in front of my laptop, in my pajamas, my dressing gown, happy out. I suppose that's definitely my favorite room of the house.
And how do you relax in the evening?
So at the moment during lockdown, I've never watched so much television in my life. So I'm watching. I
What are you
swear to God.
watching?
So, do you know what we're watching at the moment, myself and my daughter? And like people at my age will be horrified when I say this, that I've never watched Grey's Anatomy. Can you believe it? So,
Wow.
honestly, yeah, no, I'm at the time when Grey's Anatomy came out, we didn't have, the record function on Sky and be able to watch back stuff. So I was the world's worst. I've never been good at watching stuff. You know, back in the day when we had to watch something on a Monday evening at 8 o'clock or whatever day it was, I would never remember to watch something. I've been very poor at that. So I've never followed soaps. I've never followed anything like that because I can never remember to tune in at the right time. So for me, the way we have, Netflix now and TV that you can record and watch in your own time suits me perfectly because then I can just sit down when it suits me. So that's why, I never got into Grey's Anatomy at the time because I could never remember to watch it. And then I'd have missed
Yeah.
so much, I wouldn't know what's going on. So we're nearly finished season 2 now. So
Good woman.
myself and my daughter are watching it, and I have to say I'm loving it, really loving it.
Yeah, it's good. I'm totally obsessed with Netflix. So, I think now is the perfect time if you can to catch up on all those things you've always wanted to do.
Absolutely.
It's like a mixed blessing really for us all at the moment.
Yeah. So that's what I'm doing with my daughter. So we take turns. So every second night then. So I watch that with her. And then with my son, then we've just signed up to Disney Plus. So I think half the country has signed up to Disney Plus at this point. So with my son, then I'm watching stuff on that with him. So we were watching like old movies like, what did we watch the other night? Flubber. Robin Williams is in it. So, really good kind of feel good Disney movies. And yeah, it's really good. We're really enjoying it.
And tell me, Vicky, about you. Are you a super organized person at home? Are you very neat and tidy? Or tell me about you in that way. What do you like?
Yeah, I am. I'm not as bad as I used to be. I mean, I probably would have been a touch OCD, I'd say, before I had children. There were like having children was the best thing that happened to me from that point of view because I think there would have been nothing out of place in my house before I had children. Everything had to be
Mhm.
tidy and put away and, in a certain way. Whereas, when kids come along, life doesn't operate like that with children. You just have to give in at some stage. So I did. I had to just kind of let things go. But I'd be very, I'm obsessed with washing, and that comes from my mother with the laundry. And so I'm always putting on a wash and hanging out a wash. But I find it's something therapeutic about doing the laundry as well. I enjoy doing it, hanging it up, and there's something about it. So, I'd be obsessed with my laundry, and having tidy surfaces. I hate nothing more than seeing crumbs on the surface.
Yeah, me too.
Oh, Jesus, it drives me crazy.
Me too. I can't concentrate. I
No.
can't even work unless everything is just organized. It's
Yeah.
just the way I am. It drives me nuts.
Well, you and me would live well together, so Arlene.
And tell me what colors you like. Is your home a very kind of a neutral home, or do you have color pops in your home?
Yeah, it's pretty neutral, but I suppose I'm in the sitting room now doing this podcast, and the sitting room is I kind of went for a sea kind of theme in here, so there's kind of very calming blues and greys. So the walls are, I think it's French grey or something, and then nice kind of a real kind of nice rug with cream and it's kind of a teal blue. I think it's kind of tealy blue. And the sofa then is a kind of a denim, kind of navy blue material. So and I have pictures up. So I've finally gotten around to doing these things as well. So I've hung up pictures. I got these beautiful paintings from an artist in Liscannor in County Clare of local beaches. So I just love the sea. So I just decided, when I'm not near the sea, I want to have it at home. So this room literally has pictures of. I have some that are framed photographs of beaches and kind of
seascapes.
Yeah, and then I have paintings. So and we brought bits back then from holidays. So I actually brought a beautiful piece of driftwood back with me from New Zealand. Probably
what a great idea.
Bits, and I brought these beautiful clay ceramic sea urchins from New Zealand. I bought them when we were over there. So what I'm trying to do in this room is to bring bits of places that I love back into the room, so I can look at them and go, oh yeah, I remember where we got that, or that kind of idea.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. And so you like all those restful seascapes and blue tones and all very kind of relaxing. Yeah, exactly. I love those tones myself personally as well. And what's your style? What kind of style do you think? How would you describe your own style in the home?
In the home, I suppose it would be minimalist, but not minimalist, because I don't like that stark look. I like to have bits, but I wouldn't have too much. Like my best friend, for example, her house, she's really good at I love her style. The way she picks things and puts things together, but she has lots of stuff. The way she'd have loads of things on shelves and loads of pictures, whereas I like to have a bit, but not too much. So because I like to have everything put away. I don't like to have too much out. That goes back to the control freak in me, not to have stuff cluttering everywhere. But so I suppose minimalist, but homely. I like it to look like a home as well, that it's lived in.
How do you spend Christmas? I know you mentioned that you were in New Zealand last Christmas, but how would you generally spend Christmas?
Okay, so how we generally spend Christmas. So usually I am not a huge Christmas fan. I have never been a huge Christmas fan. And I remember my mother is absolutely and I mean obsessed with it. She has all the tacky Christmas stuff and it's new stuff every year. So she's just one of those. And I remember my mother always thought that, once I had kids that I'd become this huge Christmas, fanatic. And I didn't. Now, I've become better over the years. And actually, I think since I have had cancer and I suppose have had to, accept the possibility that I may not be here, I've actually become much better, and I'm really enjoying Christmas more now. But I do it for the kids, and the kids love it. My two kids absolutely adore Christmas. So we usually put the Christmas tree up kind of early on, maybe usually the second week in December, and we all do it together. So that's one thing it's something we've always done at home as well. I suppose it's traditions you learn from your parents, isn't it? So we put on the tacky Christmas CDs and we'd put up the Christmas tree together, and that's something that I have to be very careful that I kind of don't take over, because again, my whole OCD instinct starts to come out and I'm going, oh, you can't put that there. So I actually just let the kids do it. I might kind of go back and fix it afterwards and put a few, where they have maybe 10 decorations on one side. But when we're doing it, I leave them at it. I'll do a bit, but I let them do it, and then I might fix it later when they're gone. Just to spread things out more evenly. But yeah, that's something we do together. And then, I start Christmas shopping kind of around October, November. I start picking things.
Oh, you're clever.
Yeah, I do. I would be definitely organised that way. I make sure I have kind of, especially all the kids' presents, in case anything goes. So I'd be organised that way, and I have friends that I can use, attics and all of that. But yeah, that's kind of, we start out, and then we always, every Christmas for the last probably 4 or 5 years. Now, last year we didn't do it because we were going away, but we always, and I usually organise it, that we go and see Santa. So we visit Santa, but we go away somewhere as a family. So my mother and father always come, and my brothers and my sister. So we the year before. We went to New Zealand. We went to Birr Castle to see Santa, and we stayed in the hotel. And we had, we stayed all together as a family, and we had a meal, and we used the swimming pool, and it's just lovely for all the family to catch up. So yeah, we do nice things, and that's kind of the way we celebrate Christmas. And then on Christmas Day, obviously the kids open their presents at home, and we stay here for 2 or 3 days so they can play with their friends and see their own friends. And then we head down to Kilkenny for maybe another 3 or 4 days, and they open all their presents down there. So yeah, no, it's lovely.
Good, happy memories.
Yeah, absolutely.
And can I ask you about social media? I believe you're a real Twitter head. You love
Oh,
Twitter.
I love Twitter. Yeah, I love it.
And do you prefer Twitter to Instagram or Facebook?
I do, yeah. I much prefer to. I'm not. I suppose with Instagram, I look at it and I'm on it, obviously, and I'll post an odd photo up every now and then. But I'm not one of those people that does, selfie videos, and I'm just not into it. I prefer to. I suppose it comes from, I prefer to use words. I prefer to talk. I prefer to,
Yeah,
write stuff. So
it's instant, yeah, as
yeah,
well.
and I think with Instagram, it's more about the visual. Like my sister loves Instagram. She's a hairdresser, so obviously she's always on Instagram and putting up photos of her, styles that she's done, or she'll put up videos of herself talking about, different things about hair. Whereas I find talking to a camera, I just find that very strange. It's just not me. I prefer to
It's not
type.
you.
Yeah, yeah. So no, I definitely
Hmm.
prefer more. That's why I like Twitter more. I think it's because I like reading, and I like writing and reading words.
And do you find that a lot of people will come to you for advice, Vicky, on their own circumstances, perhaps relating to cervical cancer?
Yes, I do. I get an awful lot of messages actually, still, even now. So I kind of had to make a conscious decision fairly, I wouldn't say early on. It took me a long time. For a long time, I was relying to everything that came in to my phone. But I had to pull back a bit because I found it very hard. So now I just literally 1 day a week, I look at new messages that come in, and filter through them. Now, a lot of messages I get are just from people just saying thank you, they've read my book, or, just reaching out to say, they admire me for what I've done, and they're lovely, and I
Mhm.
try and get back to some of them. But to be honest, I prioritize the messages I get from people who are emailing me or messaging me, usually about a family member who has been given no hope, and they're asking about different options, and how do they go about getting a second opinion, or how do they go about, do I know of any other clinical trials that maybe they could try. So those ones take time, as well, because if I have to go off and research stuff, and at the end of the day I have to be very careful. I'm not a medical professional. I can only kind of not necessarily give them advice, give them information. um, but I suppose, I have to be careful that people don't take it as medical advice and come back and say, well, Vicky Phelan told me that I should do this. Do you know what I mean? So I always kind
Yeah.
of word the response. And in fairness, I've never had an issue. People understand that, but at the same time, I take responsibility very seriously, because I feel that people trust me. So I'm very conscious of that, and sometimes it's simple questions. It's just about how to get a referral to another doctor, that people don't even know how to do that. So I would always reply to those ones, because I think people need to know what they need to do, and not feel
Hmm.
guilty about it either, because sometimes there's an awful lot of pressure put on people. About getting another opinion from another doctor. I mean, there's nothing wrong with getting another opinion. It's like, I often use the car insurance one. Everybody gets 3 quotes when they renew their insurance.
Oh, for sure.
You know,
Absolutely.
so why wouldn't you do it
100%.
with your health? What's the difference? Your health is more important. So, I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking for another opinion if you're either not clicking with the doctor you have, or if you're not entirely, sure that what he's telling you or she's telling you is what you want to hear. I mean, if you go to another doctor and you get told the same thing, well, then fair enough. But I do think it's very important that you're comfortable with the doctor you're with, that you have a relationship with them where you feel that you can ask questions.
That is so true. And Vicky, what advice would you give to your younger self, looking back over all of the experiences that you've had in your life?
Oh, well, looking back at my youth, to have more confidence in myself, to believe in myself more. I think, when I look back at me when I was, whatever, Amelia's age or even maybe a bit older, I never believed in myself enough. I always would have knocked myself down and thought that I, wasn't good enough, that there was somebody that was always better than me. Even though, I was always well capable. I was always a good student, very, good academically. But, even in a class, if we were asked a question, in tutorial in college, often I wouldn't speak up because I wouldn't trust my own voice. So that's it, I suppose. Trust my own voice more. That, now I know when I started speaking out that, what I was saying, was valid and people wanted to hear it. So, I do trust my own voice now and I have no issue with using it. But, I wish I trusted myself more when I was growing up.
Wow, that's incredible. And would you describe yourself as a spiritual person, Vicky?
Um, I suppose so. I'm not religious. I don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe.
Totally separate to religion.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, but I suppose I do believe that there is something out there. Like for example, at the time of my car crash, I was clinically dead for I think 40 seconds or something. They had to, use the defibrillators and get me back. But I remember my dad told me this because I have no recollection of it, obviously, because I was in a coma for a week. They had me in an induced coma for 9 days or something because I was, I had so much damage and in so much pain and whatever. They couldn't wake me up until I, that settled down because I wouldn't have been able to deal with it. While I was in the induced coma, because I was on so much drugs, morphine to keep me knocked out, I was hallucinating. So every now and then I'd wake up and I'd start, literally rambling, like my father said, and I could be talking about anything, and
Wow.
sometimes it didn't make sense. But he said one day I woke up and I had a conversation with him, and I told him that I saw Nanny, so his mother, and he kind of probed a bit. And he said, "What do you mean you saw your grandmother?" And she said she came to me and she told me it wasn't my time, that it wasn't my time, and I had to go back. And she was very angry. And my grandmother, my father's mother, was the most gentle lady you've ever met. Like she never got angry with anybody.
Yeah.
And he thought he started laughing at the time, and I remember him telling me, and he said you were, he said even the way I told it, my guy said your nanny was angry, Dad. She's never angry, And she was, and I told him that she gave out to me and told me, no, it's not your time, you have to go back. And it's funny when he said it, I actually could. I kind of conjured up the image in my head, and I could nearly see her. So I do believe there is something there, and I would talk to dead people. I would talk to people like that, my grandmother, or Christoph, who are dead. I do, and I don't think there's anything crazy about that. So I do believe that there is something in those who have left us. That there is definitely a connection there, and that's what I believe in, I suppose.
And what words of hope would you have for anyone, particularly now, Vicky, that are suffering and very scared, obviously, during the coronavirus pandemic?
Yeah, it will pass, and I think that is something that I've learned over the last number of years with everything that's happened to me. You go through these awful periods in your life, and you think you'll never get over them, and you think life will never be better. But I've lived through so many of these things that I can, say with certainty, these things will pass. It will pass. All you can do, and all I'm doing at the moment, is literally taking it one day at a time. I do not look further than today or tomorrow. I'm not thinking about, 3 months down the line and whether I'll have a job or whether I'll, have enough money. And I know that they are real issues for people, but you can't start thinking about those issues now because it will just break you. So, live for the moment, one day at a time. Try and look at the positives of what's happening at the moment, and the quality time that you have with your children. You'll never get that back, if you have children. If not, use the time to do stuff that you have put off, and to do nice things for yourself. But I suppose, just live in the moment, one day at a time, and it will pass, and look at what good can come out of it, because there will be good things that come out of this, I think, as well.
Can I ask you just a quick few questions? We're calling this the podcast Quickfire questions.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's just real fast. Really, it's one or the other. Bath or shower?
Bath.
Text or talk?
Talk.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Bedside, left or right?
Left.
Bra or knickers?
Oh, knickers.
Cat or dog?
Dog.
Red or white wine?
Oh, red, 100%.
Okay. Taxi or walk?
Walk.
Home or abroad?
Oh, God. Abroad, actually.
Eat in or take out?
Eat in.
Kanye or Trump?
Oh, Jesus Christ. Oh, Christ. I think I'd have to pick Kanye. My God, Kanye.
Vicky, thank you so much for joining us today.
Not at all. Thank
And
you very much, Arlene. It was great talking to you.
I wish you all the best, and I hope to stay in touch with you.
Yeah, do, definitely. Thank you very
Take
much.
care and stay safe.
I will, and you too.